Hello again everybody, Jake Raby here, Flat 6 Innovations, bringing you another RenVision technical video. Now today we're going to go over a bit of a controversial subject. It's about additives that we might want to put into our fuel. We're going to talk about the effects of modern fuel on your fuel injectors and how these things play into the performance, longevity, and reliability of your Porsche car. So the focus of today's technical video is going to be on the 1997 through 2008 Porsche M9X series vehicles, okay? So that's going to be all your Boxster, all your Cayman, all your 911 variants. This is even going to include the GT3 and the Turbo. A lot of times we kind of separate those and put them in another category, but today we're going to keep them in this discussion. And the reason being that they have negative impacts they see from modern fuels, just like all the other engines used in those base model Carreras, Boxsters, and etc. So this is not going to be a video all about how bad modern fuels are. It's also not going to specifically target ethanol, even though ethanol-laden fuel is playing a key role in a lot of the things that we're seeing, because the alcohol content in that fuel, especially in higher percentages of ethanol-laden fuel, ends up drying out the components, okay? In older cars, I'm talking about pre-1996, which is really not the focus of this video, it dries out all sorts of things. Every car past 1996 was designed with a fuel system, be it the fuel pump, hoses, injectors supposedly, and things like this, that were made to withstand the alcohol or ethanol content in the fuel, and they do a fairly decent job of that. The older engines before 1996 that are carbureted or even have OBD1, OBDO, whatever the case may be, they would have more rubber in the fuel systems, less nylon, things like that, and the injectors do not hold up nearly as well. Of course, carburetors do not hold up well at all with modern fuels. So I have a lot of older vehicles. I have vehicles that go back to 1930. I have World War II vehicles. I have more older vehicles than I have modern Porsches. And of course, we always see modern Porsches here because it's what we do. And when I say modern, to me, modern is that 97 to 08 first generation kind of water-cooled cars, right? We do see a lot of the 9 Alpha 1, the DFI cars. They have their own sets of issues. We are not talking about those in this video. We're going to release more about those in the months to come. So with your older cars that sit around a lot, people don't really drive them, even though I drive something old every day. About the newest car that I drive is a 1995. That's my 993. And I've got a 1992 Mercedes 500e that's a daily driver also. And then everything else I've got is older Volkswagens, older Porsches, World War II vehicles. So a few years ago, about 4 years ago now, I started swapping all of my older vehicles over to a fuel called Rec 90, okay? And that is a fuel that is made for agriculture, it's made for marine engines. If you're near a marina, you can buy Rec 90. It's what boats use because it does not have ethanol content. It is basically the older generation of fuel that tends to work extremely well in my older vehicles. Now, the one thing that I've learned about that fuel is it is extremely particular to the way that you swap your engine over to it. I want to do a video about this a little bit later on, but what we've learned is if you have been running a modern fuel in your engine, whatever you can buy at the local gas pump, and you swap it over to the Rec 90, In 13 occasions in my own fleet of vehicles, I have done this and ended up with a problem almost immediately after I swap it over to the non-ethanol laden fuel. And the reason why is because when you have the ethanol in the fuel, it kind of collects a lot of humidity and moisture in the air, especially here in Georgia. We have a lot of moisture. And that's okay. It kind of lets the water mix with the fuel. It kind of resides in the fuel tank. You know, no big deal. But if I ever would let my fuel tank get almost empty and say, I'm going to swap over to the Rec 90, I dump in a full tank of Rec 90 on top of what was left in the tank. Sometimes I don't even make it around my shop before I have a fuel filter full of water, a carburetor full of water, a fuel system full of water, a fuel pressure regulator blocked by water. Almost instantaneously, it causes that problem. And I've learned if I'm going to swap over to the Rec 90 fuel, I go ahead and drain the entire fuel system. If it has a carburetor, I clean it. If it has injectors, I clean them. And then I go ahead and swap over to the Rec 90 fuel, because while the Rec 90 fuel is hydrophobic, the modern fuel that's ethanol laden is hygroscopic. So basically what that means is all the fluid, all the water that's in the humidity goes into that modern fuel and it just resides there. As soon as you put in that Rec 90 fuel, it becomes hydrophobic. It separates the water, and the water goes directly to a place you don't want it to go. So based on my experience using the modern fuels and swapping over to the Rec 90 or a non-ethanol laden fuel, if you want to do that, I highly recommend that you drain your entire fuel system and then you start from scratch with whatever fuel you're going to use and maintain that, okay? All right, so now we're on to our Porsche M9X powered cars, our GT cars, everything from that 97 up to 08 time period. Basically every Porsche that's water-cooled post 1997 that has port injection, okay? We're not going to talk about the DFI cars, we're talking about port injected cars. So the DFI cars have a fuel injector, it goes in the combustion chamber, it has a separate set of issues, and we're not talking about those. We are talking about the port injected cars, and that is what I have in my hand, is a fuel injector from a port injected Porsche M9X. Now, yours may not be the same color as this. Over this time period, some of them were kind of a dark blue like this, some were green, some were white, some were black, okay? So your injector may not look just exactly like this one. But know, if you have a car of that generation, everything I'm going to tell you today will pertain to your vehicle. So I'm going to make a very big and bold statement. I'm putting a target on my back to tell you what I really believe. And that is, if you have a 97 to 2008 Porsche engine that's port injected, your fuel injectors need to be changed. They need to be replaced with new and not rebuilt fuel injectors. And you need to go ahead and do this now based on my direct experience of seeing engine failures and advanced levels of engine wear that are coming directly from the improper amounts of fuel delivery that is basically occurring from the fuel injectors not doing their job. So I'm putting that big target on my back to tell you what I believe in, because every engine we build here at Flat 6 Innovations gets a brand new set of fuel injectors. They are not rebuilt. Now I'm going to tell you why you don't ever want to trust a rebuilt fuel injector. So people think the issue is just a dirty injector. It's dirty, it's dirty, it's dirty, the fuel is bad, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the day, a lot of times the issue is that the fuel is too clean. It has too many additives. It has too many things in it, detergent-wise and other additives that dry the fuel out on top of the ethanol. These things lead to the mechanical wear that we're seeing that makes a fuel injector not do its job. So yes, we always think that you probably can and should perform some cleaning of the fuel system using a product like Seafoam, product like Marvel Mystery Oil. I'm not sitting here, recommending that you use these things, but I'm going to tell you these two products are the only thing that you're going to see me put into one of my own engines, be it a 1930 Model A Ford, a World War II vehicle, or a Porsche. It's the only thing you're going to see me use. I've tried everything else, and I at the end of the day, really don't believe any advertisements. I believe nothing of what I hear and only half of what I see. And that's because I'm very objective about things. I have a sixth sense when it comes to paying attention to what these injector cleaners and fuel system cleaners and additives do. And over the years, I've learned I can only trust these two products with anything that I own and drive every day. So before I continue talking about these two products and more, I want to let you know we're not paid by these people, right? I'm telling you that this is stuff that, we certainly believe in, and I've used these since I was a teenager. And these are two things that I have never seen evidence of as far as change goes. Almost everything in life has changed. Fuel, oil, everything else that we deal with in the modern mechanical world has changed. I have not seen any evidence that either of these two products have changed. And I have 32 years or so of experience using these two products. And the last 10 or 12 years, pretty much, these have been the only product that I will use to clean a fuel system, okay? And I use both of them together a lot of times, according to how bad the fuel system may be or what my challenge is, okay? But again, these I use as a cleaner. These are not there to go in and stabilize the fuel, to get rid of the negative effects of ethanol or whatever. I use these to help injectors stay clean, fuel, carburetors stay clean, fuel pumps stay clean, and all that sort of thing, okay? There's another product that I use, which I actually assisted in the development of, which is Driven Carb Defender and a Driven Injector Defender. Now, what you use this for is to protect the fuel system. It does have some cleaners in it, but I have tried to use it as a substitution for a cleaner alone, and I've not had good results with it, okay? Now, I'm going to share some video with you a little bit later of my Porsche 356 that used this Carb Defender product, and it stayed in storage with old fuel in it that was modern fuel, not the Rec 90. It was what was available 5 years ago, okay, from the regular gas pump 2 miles from our shop. And it was treated with Carb Defender before the car went into display for a 5-year time period. And you're going to see what all the components look like in the fuel system after I drained that fuel, treated with a Carb Defender, and got the car back into service. All right, guys, so a little bit of backstory here. This is a 51.5 millimeter IDA Weber. This is an original Italian IDA. I've had these carburetors for 25 years. You can see Bologna, Italy right here. And I've already started kind of taking them apart before I shot the video. But long story short, I've got a pair of these on my Porsche 356C Outlaw. It's a air-cooled technology Type 4, 2.6 liter, makes 227 horsepower. I've been doing that for about 21 years now. And the car's been on display for 5 years. So, I haven't driven it. It's just been sitting there for 5 years. I treated the carbs, or the whole fuel system actually, with Driven Carb Defender. And that's a product that Lake Speed and I developed when he was at Driven Racing Oils. So I'm going to show you what's inside this carburetor, because it's the engine, the car has been setting up for 5 years on display. So I'm going to take it apart, show you what I find on the inside. I've already rebuilt one of the carburetors, which really didn't need to be rebuilt. It barely even needed to be cleaned, even though it had dirty fuel sitting in it for 5 years. That dirty fuel was treated with Driven Carb Defender. I'm going to show you what I find inside of this one in just a minute. All right, so got the carburetor disassembled. So this is the same thing I saw with the other carb. So again, this is 5 years since the car has been cranked. And I didn't think it was going to be that long, right? I just put it on display somewhere, and then it just sat there for 5 years. It's not like I prepared it. So all my cars, I use the Driven Carb Defender in, and this one was no exception. And now I'm going to show you. This is like really nasty fuel in here, right? But, I mean, it doesn't have any corrosion. That's the main thing. Usually, it would be all corroded and everything would be white with the ethanol fuel. But look at this, okay? That fuel doesn't even smell dead. And look, there's zero corrosion in here. All I'm going to do is just blow this thing out and put it right back together again. That's all I'm going to do. I mean, it doesn't need anything else. So this stuff works. It's 5 years, not 5 weeks, 5 years. Look at the color of the float. Look at the top of the carb. Usually this would be just encrusted with white junk, okay? This is no BS, people. This stuff actually freaking works. I had no corrosion problems whatsoever with any of the components in that fuel system. I literally drained the fuel out, put some fresh fuel in it. I cleaned the carburetors even though I didn't have to, okay, just to see what would happen, and I put the car immediately back into service with no ill effects. Again, this is a treatment that will help to preserve the fuel system for storage. These two are used to clean the fuel system. So while both the Marvel Mystery Oil and the Seafoam are basically a motor treatment, this one even says it, meaning that you can also put it into your oil. I do not do that. I am of the school of thought and the practical application experience level to know I do not want to imbalance my engine's oil, that critical balance between the anti-wear package, the base oil, all the elements that go into that. I do not want to create an imbalance in that by adding anything to my engine's oil. I'm not going to do it. The only time to use an oil additive is never. I'm a firm believer in that. I've seen what happens when you do alter that critical balance, okay? This one is not designed to go in your oil, just in your fuel. These two can go either way. So the only time that I will use either one of these two is if I am going to immediately tear an engine down. Okay, let's say I've got an engine that comes to me that had heavy bore scoring. It's got a ton of sludge in it. It's an old engine. It's a 1930 model. It's a 1940 model. It's got tons of stuff that's been in it for 60, 70, 80 years, whatever the case may be. And I work on all kinds of stuff, not just Porsches, but professionally, I'm just a Porsche engine developer and builder. At the end of the day, I'm going to use both of these in heavy concentrations just before I take that engine apart, okay? I'm going to go ahead and get the engine hot. I'm going to dump these in. I'm going to take it for a blast up the road and back. I'm going to come back and immediately dump the engine oil out. The reason I'm going to do that is because it's going to help me clean all the sludge out of it. So when I take the engine apart, I'm going to stay cleaner, and a lot of this stuff is going to come out in the oil that would normally come out in my ultrasonic cleaning machine or whatever and get it dirtier faster. So the only time I'm going to use these products, I'm going to use them in the oil only if I'm going to take the engine apart immediately, okay? I never put anything in the oil to clean the engine unless I'm going to immediately take it apart, because I've learned it breaks down a lot of stuff and sends it where you don't want it to go. With the M9X series engines, if you use something like this in your oil, you can end up breaking loose some deposit somewhere and putting it in the valve train. And then you end up with a bad lifter that you normally wouldn't have. So I just wanted to go over that because everybody wants my recommendation about what I'm going to do. What I'm not going to do is use this in my oil unless I'm taking that engine apart tomorrow. So again, the problem isn't that your fuel system is dirty in most cases. The problem is that the fuel that you are using is not friendly over a long period of time with your fuel system as an entirety, okay? So we are seeing a major problem with this series of Porsche engine having cylinder bore scoring issues, oil dilution issues from excess fuel, cylinder wear, all sorts of things are coming from the fuel injectors not delivering a nicely injected amount of fuel via a correct spray pattern. The other issue is, due to mechanical wear, when you shut your engine off, the engine is not maintaining fuel system pressure over a long period of time. So it's a 90-degree day here in Georgia today, here in 2021 in the month of June. You know, if I go to the store and I shut my car off, I expect my fuel system to hold that 58 or so PSI the entire time I'm in the store and for a little time after that. But if you have a worn fuel injector, and that worn fuel injector is not adequately sealing off, when you shut your engine off, that injector is going to dribble fuel into the intake port. If that intake valve for that intake port, the pair of valves, if they are open, that fuel is going to directly drip into your cylinder. When you fire the engine up, it's going to smoke. If you pay attention, sometimes people see a blue haze of smoke, and a lot of times that is fuel that's being burned in excess amounts that is mixing with oil that is wicked past the piston rings. Immediately people think it's oil. Bang, I'm burning oil. Bang, I'm burning oil. Or I've got oil emitting out of my tailpipes when the engine is cold or when I've just started it up. That is fuel. It is not oil. Sometimes it's condensation that mixes with carbon and it comes out black. Most of the time you're seeing that you actually have a fuel metering problem with your injectors. They are not metering the proper amount of fuel, or that fuel is going into the engine when the engine isn't running as a droplet. Or, since you have improper atomization of the injected fuel because the injector is worn, that fuel is falling from suspension during engine operation. It is going into the cylinder as a liquid fuel, as a droplet. That does not thoroughly burn. So part of it goes by your piston rings, laces your oil. It ends up with fuel intrusion that is measurable in used oil analysis. It also will cut the viscosity of your oil, which is measured in a used oil analysis. So a lot of times we see used oil analysis with high amounts of fuel intrusion, and that is directly related to the fuel injectors, okay? So the other thing I want to talk to you about is the fuel pump. And on some cars, the fuel pressure regulator. So in the later cars, post-2001, they don't even have a fuel filter anymore. Everything's kind of built in the tank. They don't have an external pressure regulator except for the turbo. And, you know, the pressure regulator is kind of a thing of yesterday, right? So everything is handled in the tank. We also are seeing fuel pumps that are dying. Okay, we've been able to diagnose cars that come into our facility before we pull the engines from them, and we can go and we can look at the fuel trims and we can see that it's adding fuel. Sometimes it's trying to add fuel because the fuel pump is not putting out a proper volume of fuel. Okay, and fuel trim's another whole session here on video about how we use it to diagnose injectors that are not metering fuel properly, as well as a fuel pump that is not feeding this injector with the amount of fuel properly, or the cases where you have a fuel pressure regulator where it's not doing its job. So there are things you have to use with the fuel trim to see what's actually going on. At the end of the day, we look for physical conditions. People that just plug in an onboard diagnostic system, a P-Wiz, Autologic, a Durametric, whatever the case may be, they think that they can properly diagnose fuel pumps or fuel injectors or whatever the case may be without any physical properties coming into play. That's not the key, right? We have to take some of those electronic signals, some, what we smell, what we see, what we pay attention to, how smooth the engine runs, what the oil feels like on our fingers when we drain it, what it smells like. There's a whole lot of these things that go into this that are basically grown from experience, okay? But at the end of the day, if you haven't changed your injectors yet, and I don't care if your car has 5,000 miles on it or 500,000 miles on it, you must change the injectors and you must use a new fuel injector, okay? So as I close out this technical video, again, I want to say you can rebuild this injector all day long. You're just going to change a couple of seals inside of it and perform a nice, thorough cleaning procedure to it. That's not going to do anything to get rid of or omit the problems that this injector has had over the last 15 or 20 years that's being used, right? What you're going to do is throw it away, and you're going to buy a new one, and you're going to replace it with a like item, okay? And that is the best way to make sure that you're not going to have issues come from an injector. To me, almost every car we see at Flat 6 Innovations today is needing a fuel pump. If we test these cars, we find the fuel pumps are getting tired. I don't want my engine to have a problem. So at this point, we are almost to the point of mandating a new fuel pump, and in some cases, we mandate replacing all the corrugated tubing that feeds the fuel pump inside the tank. We're seeing a problem with that, where it's drying out, it's cracking, it's got plastic in it, rubber in it, and those fuel lines are causing a problem as well. This stuff is cheap insurance to make sure you're not going to have a problem. So if you're spending a lot of money on an engine, you have to understand that a subsystem can give you a bad result. You can do all these things to the inside of the engine, and a fuel pump can kill it. A fuel injector can kill it, and that is not going to be the fault of the engine. okay? So again, cleaning is just cleaning. Rebuilding is just another word for cleaning, is all it is. You can't take that injector apart and you can't get rid of the mechanical wear that injector has seen over the last 15 to 20 years it's been in service. So I want you to like and subscribe to our channel. I want you to like us on Facebook. I want you to come back for more technical videos, and you can guarantee we're always going to be real.